Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Tonight, reporting from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Good evening. It was an extraordinary moment this morning, and now that America is back in space, the space agency and perhaps even the nation can finally stop looking back at Challenger and concentrate on the future. We got the same report from all over the country this morning. You could cut the tension with a knife. For a while there, most people here at the Kennedy Space Center were convinced that Discovery wouldn't fly today. NASA had very strict rules about the weather being just right, but then they seemed to bend the rules just a bit. ABC's Lynn Scher is with us here at the Cape, and she begins with that concern about the weather.
Before the sun came up, before the skies and the outlook brightened, NASA was worried about high-altitude winds and delayed the liftoff for an hour to study the problem. With the situation still unresolved, the crew got the go-ahead to put on their new pressure suits. Astronauts were ready to fly again. But as the men of Discovery entered their machine, another problem kept some of them waiting. Inside, a blown fuse kept the cooling fan from working in a spacesuit. Technicians replaced the fuse and the fan started. Still, they were worried about the weather. Shifting winds about 40,000 feet high that could tear the shuttle apart. But when analysis indicated Discovery could safely handle the winds, which by then were shifting in NASA's favor, the launch team waived a constraint. Former astronaut Robert Crippen relayed the good news.
I have pulled the technical community, and you will have our consensus to proceed with this launch. Good luck and Godspeed.
We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
It was simply the best liftoff anyone here had ever seen. The cheers of encouragement mingled with tears of relief. When Discovery disappeared briefly into a cloud, you could almost hear 250,000 gasps until it reappeared in the bright blue sky. Then Discovery passed the 73-second mark, the moment Challenger had exploded.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
Go.
The redesigned booster rockets had worked, and the spent casing split off from the shuttle to drift to the sea for recovery. NASA was elated, even though they'd launched more than an hour and a half late.
And so be it, but I guarantee you it was a keeper.
NASA managers indicated that despite their elation, they will never compromise their standards.
Speaking as a member of the mission management team, if you've lived through 51L, you're never going to take it for granted.
That is the real lesson of Challenger. No matter how spectacular NASA made it look today, no matter how easy they may make it look in the future, no one can ever take space travel for granted. Not NASA, nor any of the rest of us. Peter?
Thank you, Lynn. How true. Well, the moment the Discovery had cleared the tower at the launch pad here at Cape Canaveral, Mission Control in Houston took command for the remainder of the flight. ABC's Morton Dean, who was there, has a report on how the rest of the day has gone.
From the shuttle's cargo bay, a wave hello, or a wiggle hello, from space. The only picture so far, the shuttle's payload. The astronauts were feeling on top of the world, and so were the folks back in Mission Control.
And we just wanted to pass along to you that we hope that you enjoy the next 4 days. You've certainly earned them.
Okay, Houston, we copy all that, and we sure appreciate y'all getting us on up to orbit the way we should be.
The big task in space was to reestablish the shuttle's reputation as a delivery truck. Delivered was a communications satellite, a copy of the one destroyed in the Challenger accident. Its own propulsion system would carry it into an orbit over 22,000 miles above the Earth. It's to be used to help U.S. spaceships communicate with the ground and with each other. It was a special day for special reasons. Two of the Challenger wives watched the launch on TV.
I was, unaware of the tears that came to me, at remembering some of the things that I tried very hard not to remember.
I was building up to the 73 seconds by telling my 11-year-old daughter that just in a few seconds everything would be all right. Just a few seconds more, Aaron, just a few seconds more.
The Discovery's trip to space is both a mission and a memorial. Morton Dean, ABC News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.
Here at the Cape, 250,000 people turned out to watch. Not as many as NASA had expected, but a lot of people all the same. Many were clearly thinking about the Challenger, and the sigh of relief as Discovery soared into space was enormous. The launch had a special meaning for some school children in Port St. John, Florida. And ABC's John Quinones went to see them.
The children of Challenger 7 Elementary had been anxiously waiting for this day ever since the Challenger explosion. Many of these kids were eyewitnesses to that tragedy.
I just fell apart when it blew up.
But the children were convinced that today's launch of Discovery would be different.
What do you want for the Space Shuttle today?
I want to go.
The kids spent hours painting posters, building shuttle models, and writing down in words sentiments of the heart.
Dear NASA, hope this launch is a good one, and I hope no one gets hurt going up. I know the Challenger was a giant disaster for the space program. I want to wish the astronauts a good trip. I'm sure everyone here is proud of you because you are very special, all of you.
By launch time, the children, now nervous with anticipation, gathered outside their school in the shadow of the Kennedy Space Center.
3, 2, 1,
As Discovery painted a picture-perfect liftoff, the children of Challenger Elementary formed one huge pep rally.
I knew it'd make it. I didn't have no doubt about it.
It's made it, guys!
John Quinones, ABC News, Port St. John, Florida.
All that green for go. All over the world today, people watched the launch, and the Soviet Union did as well. Moreover, the Soviet Union chose today to release pictures of its own space shuttle. This is the first time that the West, or for that matter the Soviet people, have seen the Soviet ship. The Soviets have been developing a shuttle at least since 1982, and it may fly this one before the end of the year, and doesn't it look familiar? In a moment, the Nobel Peace Prize. It goes to the United Nations. And later in the broadcast, the big loophole in campaign financing laws. And smokeless tobacco. How much cleaner is it really?
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings at the Kennedy Space Center. Brought to you by Johnson & Johnson.
Overseas today, the announcement of the winners of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. Winners, we said. The winners are the members of the United Nations peacekeeping forces around the world. There was some disappointment in Washington, where members of the White House staff had said openly they wanted the president to win it. Mr. Reagan said he wasn't disappointed, that the UN peacekeepers deserved it more. This is the 16th time that an organization, rather than an individual, has won the Nobel. Here's ABC's Mike Lee.
The winners of the Nobel Peace Prize were today doing their jobs as usual, like patrolling southern Lebanon, where they've been since 1978. There are currently 10,000 soldiers from 35 countries serving in 7 locations throughout the Middle East, Asia, and Afghanistan. Since 1948, a total of 500,000 men from 58 countries have served throughout the world as peacekeepers and ceasefire observers. 733 have been killed while trying to prevent war. The largest casualty toll, 152 deaths, was in Lebanon. Other UN troops there, including American Marine Lieutenant Colonel William Higgins, have been kidnapped. The Nobel Prize means a lot to UN forces.
I think it's very good for us, for all our people who are within the UN, serving for the peace each day we work.
Not everyone is pleased with UN peacekeepers. The Soviets today claim that observers in Afghanistan are failing to prevent ceasefire violations. But a sour note from Moscow did not spoil today's celebrations. Mike Lee, ABC News, London.
In the Soviet Union today, all other subjects are being overshadowed by yet another test of Mr. Gorbachev's leadership. The Central Committee of the Soviet Communist Party is going to meet tomorrow, and the subject is essentially Mr. Gorbachev's record. ABC's Rick Inderfirth is in Moscow.
Almost all of the Kremlin's top leadership are now in Moscow. The rest are rushing back to attend the hurriedly scheduled meeting of the Central Committee, all 300 members. At the Foreign Ministry today, a spokesman labeled that session one of the most important meetings of the party and acknowledged that Mikhail Gorbachev's reform program is in trouble.
Yes, we have some people resisting, even resisting the perestroika as a general process.
Я хотел бы сказать
It was just 3 months ago that Soviet leader Gorbachev convened a special party conference, the first in over 40 years. He pushed through an ambitious package of reform, including a timetable for overhauling the nation's political system and reorganizing and eliminating many positions within the party leadership. But since the party conference, the pace of Gorbachev's reforms has slowed. He's criticized local party leaders for failing to implement his programs and complained that he's being attacked by the political right and left in Moscow. Added to this, the continuing ethnic unrest in the Soviet republics of Armenia and Azerbaijan, posing a direct political challenge to Gorbachev's leadership. Mikhail Gorbachev is expected to use tomorrow's Central Committee meeting to light yet another fire for his political and economic reforms. But his success will probably hinge on his ability to replace those party members who are standing in his way. Rick and DeFirth, ABC News, Moscow.
When we come back, American leadership politics and the kind of soft money that goes with it. In the presidential campaign today, George Bush continued his attack on Michael Dukakis's proposals for tougher tax collection. He said it would mean a government hand in every pocket and a tax agent in every home. Governor Dukakis got a little help from Robert Redford. The actor appeared with Dukakis at a rally in New Jersey where a number of environmental groups gave the governor their endorsement. And now we have a report on politics and money. It's a fact of life in politics now that candidates spend a huge fortune in the effort to be elected. At the presidential level, there is a campaign financing law that says no candidate may spend more than $54 million, and no one person may contribute more than $1,000 to a candidate. But, as ABC's Barry Serafin reports, the law appears to have a big loophole.
The candidates are never too busy to make time for campaign fundraisers. The Dukakis campaign brought in more than $5 million from a single dinner this month in New York. If you thought the days of big, mostly anonymous contributions were long past, you're in for a surprise. The Watergate scandal in the 70s revealed huge amounts of campaign money raised and spent in secret. So Congress enacted limits and disclosure requirements. But now the fat cats are back, thanks to something called soft money. Under strict laws growing out of Watergate, each candidate this year receives $46 million in federal campaign funds and another $8 million in party funds. That's it. But both parties are trying to nearly double that amount with soft money. Here's how it works. Since 1979, the law has allowed money to be collected and spent for state party-building purposes, such as polling, registration, and get-out-the-vote efforts. All of that helps the national ticket, especially in key states. What's more, the parties use soft money to help pay for TV ads, which don't mention the candidates, but do stress national themes and issues.
I remember you. You're the one who made me feel so blue. Hey, pal, how about a couple $100 billion? I'll pay you right back.
This is what the Republicans call managing the economy.
Critics call soft money spending a shell game, an end run around the law.
This is a sham. The presidential campaigns are raising the money, running it through the state parties, and having it spent on their behalf. And unless this activity is stopped, we are going to undermine the very law that got us out of the Watergate mess.
Unlike direct campaign contributions, which are limited to $1,000, soft money can be raised in any amount, and the parties can disclose as little as they want about where it came from. And both parties are going at it with a vengeance. Through $100,000 contributions, the Democrats aim to collect $42 million. The Republicans, $25 million, plus another $25 million in smaller contributions. Each points a finger at the other.
If we weren't to do it, we would be conceding a competitive advantage to the Republicans, and I, for one, refuse to give them that advantage.
I don't think we had any choice. We'd have been left in the dust if we hadn't joined the fray.
Both sides insist they are doing nothing wrong, but both say there should be reforms and limits after the election. The Federal Election Commission will take up the issue of soft money after the election. Barry Serafin, ABC News, Washington.
In Washington today, the gun possession trial of the newspaper columnist Carl Rowan has ended in a mistrial. Rowan, a strong advocate of gun control, was charged with possessing an unregistered handgun which he had used to slightly wound an intruder at his home in June. The jury was deadlocked. In our next segment, smokeless tobacco, trying to clean up the image. Tomorrow is supposed to be payday in East St. Louis, Illinois, but it won't be. For the second pay period in a row, the city's workers won't be paid because the city is broke. ABC's Charles Thomas has this report on financial crisis.
Frank Gardner takes a big chance going to work every day. He and other East St. Louis firefighters have no health insurance and have not received a paycheck in nearly a month.
I'm concerned because I know if I'm hurt or any of the men's hurt, I know we don't have insurance. I know we're not getting paid.
230 East St. Louis city employees are the latest victims in the worsening financial crisis here. With its once thriving industrial base virtually gone, the city of 50,000 mostly poor people is running out of money, and homeowners are worried.
It's just going down now. And I don't know how far we are going down. It's just really bad.
East St. Louis already has made deep cuts in services like trash pickup and public safety. Yesterday, the federal government became the latest creditor to seize the city's bank accounts to collect an unpaid debt. The state of Illinois also claims the city owes it money, and the governor today called for state intervention to help solve the growing crisis.
I think what has to happen is a legislative appraisal of the situation in East St. Louis because the city is, for all practical purposes, bankrupt.
If East St. Louis declared bankruptcy, it would be the largest city to do so since Cleveland in 1978. But so far, city officials have resisted any effort by outsiders to take control.
We're not about to let anybody from any place else come in and take over our town, tell us what to do.
The mayor says that East St. Louis can solve its own problem with more cuts in city services. But unpaid workers, state officials, and many residents fear there's too little left to cut. Charles Thomas, ABC News, East St. Louis, Illinois.
And now, smoking. It's estimated that there are 50 million Americans who smoke. About 3 million quit every year. And at least that many, probably far more, try to. That is the group that one of the biggest tobacco companies has now targeted for a brand new kind of cigarette that will be test marketed in St. Louis and Phoenix starting this weekend. Here's our medical correspondent, George Strait.
It's the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world of Salem cigarettes.
Remember 30 years ago when cigarettes and cigarette smoking were fashionable, before the dangers were publicized? Well, now, with the numbers of smokers declining and the numbers of places where you can't smoke rising, the tobacco industry is trying something new. Premier.
It dramatically reduces both the number and the quantity of compounds, including a substantial reduction in the controversial compounds.
Premier looks like a cigarette. It contains tobacco and produces as much nicotine as other low-nicotine brands. But there are major differences. Neither the tobacco nor the paper burn. A carbon tip is lighted, which heats the air the smoker draws into the product. Also, the flavor comes from flavor beads in this porous aluminum capsule inside the cigarette. The beads contain nicotine and food additives, which create a smoke-like flavor when the warm air passes over them.
It doesn't taste like you're smoking tobacco.
What does it taste like?
Like you're smoking plastic. I mean, what's that thing inside of it?
I like the taste of it very much.
The R.J. Reynolds Company calls Premier the cleaner cigarette. But what does cleaner mean? Anti-smoking groups charge the tobacco industry is implying that Premier is safer.
It doesn't matter what they call it. The reality is they've done everything they can to promote it as safer.
Are you going to tell me that there's no way that anyone could infer that there's an implicit message here?
That is not our intent.
There is also controversy about the smoke produced by Premier. Less is visible, and the company says what is produced contains fewer chemicals. It's a claim that has not been independently verified. Critics charge that Premier is so different it should be banned. They say it's not a cigarette at all, but rather just an elaborate mechanism for delivering the drug nicotine.
RJR has been very slick. And unfortunately, the people who will pay will be the American public who buys this product falsely believing it is a truly safe alternative to cigarettes.
Premier is a $200 million experiment. It's the tobacco industry's first ever cigarette alternative. The first admission that regular cigarettes may be dangerous. It's an alternative which shows just how far tobacco companies will go to get and keep people smoking. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.
In Washington this Thursday, an important extension for AIDS patients. The federal government was about to cut off funds with which AIDS victims were able to buy the life-extending drug AZT. The federal government wants the states to pay for the drug, but while the two levels of government fight, the Congress says it will go on paying for AZT for another 6 months. A strong day on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrials gained nearly 34 points, and the trading was moderate. And we'll be back with a final note from the Cape in just a moment. And just before we leave the Cape, a couple of final notes. For many people in the world, the U.S. space program has always been a metaphor for American leadership in general. And when the program was derailed by the disaster that befell Challenger, many of those same people questioned America's general ability to lead. When Discovery shot into the sky today, at least for many people down here, it was a moment to hold their heads up again. And then there was Ron McNair's brother and his wife. Ron McNair was one of the astronauts who died on Challenger. What was it like down here today? Ron McNair's brother and his wife all but willed Discovery into orbit.
It's going. Yeah! Yeah! They're out of here. They are out of here. Hey, they gone, babe. They're out of here.
That's our report on World News Tonight. We'll be back in New York tomorrow night, and we'll see you then. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night from Cape Canaveral.